Okay, next, the last speaker for the morning session, the keynote speaker is Professor Huang. Professor Huang, you know him very well, and also is a very respected expert in this field. As Mr. Huang just mentioned, for the decades, he has been dedicated to the mission, founding mission, and also bear in mind his mission of disseminating the TCM. Mr. Huang, just as he explained, is to benefit our people and restore the understanding, the awareness on people about the Jingfang, whether be it the doctors in the Western medicine or TCM. In the end of the day, it's about the health China as well as benefiting our people. Due to his contribution, he has been really recognized as a famous Chinese medicine practitioners. We have seven famous practitioners in provincial hospital of TCM. At the same time, five masters of those TCM field with joint effort from the team of that experts. So those experts will have been able to make even greater contributions and achievements. Let's give a round of applause to welcome Professor Huang. He is going to deliver a presentation titled My Understanding of Jingfang Medicine. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jiang, the president, for the moderation and also introduction. Well, today I'm going to share with you a presentation titled as My Understanding of the Jingfang Medicine. There's a way of saying in Chinese TCM that the different schools have different understandings about the Zhang Zhongjing, and different schools have different interpretations of the Shanghan Lun. That means that often for TCM, the personal reflections and ideas and interpretations always is there, always matters. So this is why I'm going to share with you my own personal understandings about the Jingfang medicine, and also what in my mind the Jingfang medicine should take a form. Jingfang is the brief name, abbreviations of the classical prescriptions. At the same time, it's the boiled down empirical formulas after thousands of years of Chinese civilization. It's actually been passed on for generations and generations. It's while lecturing in overseas China, I always say that do not translate it into the classical prescription or formula. I would have to say that in Jingfang, because this is the original one created by Chinese people in the Han Shu, the really book of medicine. It's already been really well explained, and therefore the Chinese pronunciation of Jingfang has to be the wording for the Jingfang. And this is why always I will use a Jingfang being pronounced as a JF or the Jingfang. This is a brand of Chinese culture, the brand of Chinese language. But of course, Jingfang is not only been limited to being a formula, it is at the same time the really synonym of Jingfang medicine. Jingfang medicine is something not differentiated and being really cut outside the modern medicines. This is not to say that it's a contrast school of medicines to the modern medicines, but more often I would say that they emphasize a lot of the traditional mindset and also philosophies of the TCM, traditional TCMs. It actually record the experiences of the formula usages of the forefathers. At the same time, the ideologies of the using the formulas to regulating human bodies. It is quite important that in reading the Shanghan Lun, there's a saying that you have to really see the symptoms and also to trace down to the natures. It's actually a right methodologies and mindset being established when passing on the TCM nowadays. The important thing, the key here is actually to really have the right methodologies and also ideas being established. For Zhongjing, or the Jingfang medicines in my mind, they're having three characteristics. So started with, first of all, Jingfang has to have really function or formula presentations that is the science-based inner course of the Jingfang medicine. These function doesn't be easily equalized to the etiology or pathogenesis, as according to many textbooks. It's actually more about evidence for applying Jingfang. It's the evidence, clinically speaking, for using the formula, or more precisely speaking, it's really safe, effective utilization of the formula, and those are the clinical evidence to support this safe and effective utilization of formula. And that is called function or presentation differentiation, formula presentation. This formula presentation is quite important, starting from its objectivity, because there's no actually misunderstandings or ambiguities of the formula presentation. This is a very important nature of being a science of the formula. So Jingfang's formula presentation is the most scientific core of the TCM. Of course, Jingfang is something also have touch of the culture as well, but it's very important to really save lives, and you have to base upon the science. This is not to only playing the lip services or actually playing some games on the concept and then can save the lives. You have to have some scientific elements to save lives. In the end of the day, in the 1980s, together with my students back then, we conducted a really investigation back then. We take out the 3 dictionaries. One is a TCM dictionary. This is a technological terminologies, as well as a Chinese dictionary of Cihai, as well as another Cihai branch or Cihai subcategory book on the health medications. We want to really use these 3 Chinese dictionaries to understand the different explanations of the meanings of these Jingfang. And we found that it's actually different wording, different namings. Often heart is heart and vessel is vessel. It's quite clear in the Cihai healthcare catalog. This multi-ambiguity is only like 0.3%. And Cihai is using the natural language, and then you have a different multi-meaning for interpretation of the even one word, and its ratio reaches the 11.2%. For Zhongyi or TCM, the Chinese dictionaries, they have a very severe, actually you have a like a higher rate of 15.8% of these kind of multi-meaning or multi-annotations to the same word. That leads to a lot of the ambiguity. Sometimes you're putting the wrong name for describing the wrong mismatched symptoms. This is, of course, a bottleneck for the development of the TCM. A lot of the people already pointed out that William Ray in late 19th century already mentioned that for doctors after Jing and Yuan dynasties, dogmatic on applying internal classics are often seen. They often have different meanings, even for the same word, not even like 2 different interpretations, or even 5 or 3 different meanings of the same word. This has compromised the development of the TCM. But for Fang or the formula presentation, is actually less ambiguity found. Often is one formula presentation, one actually formula by Chen Xiuyuan. He says that if it is a disease about that indication, then it has to apply the Jingfang. It's quite rigorous. If it is Guizhi Tang, then it is Guizhi Tang presentation. If it is Ma Huang Tang, then it is you have to meet the required criteria for the Ma Huang Tang formula presentation. It's less ambiguity in there, and therefore you can actually have more objectivities by using the Jingfang. It's just like a one key corresponding to one log, and one Jingfang to one Jingfang presentation. There are really 60 or 600 these functions, and most importantly, there are actually around 100 the really Jingfangs. Often it's one presentation to one symptom or one disease. Just now, Mr. Liu said that Wu Mei pill treating this refractory bowel disease. This is actually quite important. You have tongues, you have tongue patterns, you have the really etiologies, and also the losing tools of stools, for example, as other symptoms. It's like one key to unlock this unlock this lock. It's one presentation matching these big doors of like big disease. If it is actually, however big the disease might be, with one key you can actually open it, and it is quite important. Qin Huangbo is the Qing dynasty's a good expert of studying these Jingfang. He said that the Zhongjing's formula started from the presentation. It's actually a really lively way of applying the Zhongjing's formula by the presentations. And of course, it is always important to apply the formulas based upon the presentations. Often at the same time, you have some flexibilities of using these kind of formulas. Zhongjing's methodology is not only to study the 6 meridians, but at the same time using and applying in a flexible way of these formulas. Xu Lingtai had a deep study about the Shanghan Lun. He wrote a book about the analogies of similar formulas about the Shanghan Lun. There are actually 7 years he spent in really compiling this book, and 5 revisions he did. but in the end of the day, he published. It's actually a very crystallized, very abstracted way of describing that. And they give 12 different categories: Guizhi Tang, Ma Huang Tang, Wu Ling San, and different 12 degree categories of these formulas. He really summarized. He studied about the Fang formula presentation. He said that there is always a fixed patterns about the treatment of the disease, but the disease might actually verify or change, and therefore the basic fundamental treatment, and then according to the actual conditions, you can flexibly give the treatment. Of course, with that the fundamental knowledge about the disease itself and etiologies and pathogenesis, you have some flexibilities. You will never mistake in that kind or in that direction. He proposed very important the clinical theories that is, and also a founding principle that is to having the formula presentation matched with the formula. With this book, he's quite satisfied about the book itself. He said that with this book, you can actually treat all kinds of the disease types, and I really spent 7 years on writing this book and then 5 revisions, and there's no regret of any mistakes ever made in this book. This is quite important because he grafted the essence of the TCM.
Wang Xigao is from Wuxi, a famous Jingfang expert, and in the annotations of reflections, I said, if there is a presentation, use the formula. This is a mantra from TCM doctors from Jiangyin and Wuxi. Don't look at Zhanfu, just look at the presentation, then use the formula. This is what Wang Xigao said. This is basic way of thinking for TCMs. Hu Xishu had said this. This is at the top of determining treatment by pattern identification if you use Fang. If you look at the 6 channels, meridians, that's not enough. Whether it's Sanjiao or 6 meridians, at the end of the day, you give a piece of paper with the prescriptions to a patient. So the top is about identifying patterns, presentations, and if you have good differentiation for the pattern and presentation, you will choose the right formula. Liu Duzhou is a great educator for Jingfang. He's an expert in code damage. He wrote good records. He used good formulas from Zhang Zhongjing, original ones from Zhang Zhongjing. He wrote a very good paper called Relativity of Shanghan Lun. He said to enter the courtyard of Shanghan Lun, start from the entrance of Fang Zheng. This is the entrance to Shanghan Lun. This is an educator. You see, in the education of TCM doctors, we fail to use Jingfang, 6 meridians, 8 principles. These are part of the course, but Fang Zheng was not taught well, and it led to difficulties. This is from folklores. So if the formula meets the presentation, then drink some soup, you're okay. But if there's a mismatch, you have ships of herbs. You know, this is from the local mantra. It's from the folklore songs. You know, a TCM doctor will use the herbs and treat you for years to rectify it. But no, not necessarily. You know, TCMs can treat acute conditions. One dose could turn around a patient. So must make sure formula and presentation match each other. You know, if you write the formula for the right presentation, some soup will do better for the patient. But if you do it wrong, it will not work. We need to look at the original text of Shanghan Lun and synopsis of Golden Chamber. These are the classic Fang Zhengs. They are the starting points because they are the boiling down of such experiences. They are the crown jewels. These are the passwords set by Asian TCM masters. And also, these are the means Zhang Zhongjing used to treat patients. We say these are classic formulas. There are classic evidence. So I call for young TCM doctors to learn about these classics if you want to be a qualified TCM doctor. This is from the TCM administration of China. Read the original texts. A lot of these formula presentations, there is vacuity of taxation, and there is abdominal pain. Use 小建中汤. That's a starting point. And there is thin body. There is high tone in the abdominal muscle, dry stool. There is yellow hand. There is possibility of palpitation, but abdominal pain is a very important key area to look at. 白虎 plus 人参汤. There are mentionings of thirst. After big sweating, there is high thirst and would like to have liters of water, dry mouth, thirst. These are the presentations and patterns of 白虎 plus 人参汤. You look at this large pulse. Some have to look at their physical constitution. You need to add 人参 if they have been devastated by this. 乌猪鱼汤 could stop pain in headache. You can deal with too much saliva. For Parkinson's disease patients, they have a lot of saliva. 乌猪鱼汤 will govern. These are patients who are vexed and agitated. They're always frowning, they feel bad, they have high anxiety. 乌猪鱼汤 will govern. You could treat depression. These are key indications from previous doctors. 竹叶石膏汤. After the cold damage is relieved, the patient is thin and weak. So lei means they get thin because of disease. There is lack of qi. There is counterflow of qi. They would like to vomit. Then use 竹叶石膏汤. I use this a lot for my patients. We'll put some rice in it. It smells good, palatable, and it's very good. Let me give you an example. September 22nd, 2021, 78-year-old female came to my clinic. She was thin, 46 kg only. From September, there is watery stool 20 times per day. There's no appetite. It could only have some lotus root powder. Body weight reduced from 67 kg to 46 kg. For an old lady, muscles and fat are something supporting her. She felt thirsty. She could only drink. She liked dancing, but she could not walk. She was on wheelchair. So there was sarcoma for this patient, and there was THA replacement for this patient. And there is inflammation in the rectum. She was thin, anemia, there is crimson, no coating in the tongue. Typical in deficiency, there's less fluid and humor. For this old granny, I used 竹叶石膏汤. I've made the prescription to 高蚕, to 甘草, etc. and add rice 3 per day. This formula with 7 herbs. This is Jingfang. Then diarrhea stopped. Better appetite. I could have porridge. That's on September 29th. For follow-up, body weight increased, dry mouth turn around, and this patient sticked to this. She could not use any wheelchair. She could dance again. Body weight now is 57.5 kg. Good vitality, no need for wheelchair. There's high hope for her, for the future. That's where the charm of Jingfang lies. we follow the Zhang Zhongjiang's Jingfang. We need to look at those presentation and choose the right formula. You know, Jingfang is about language. It's about thinking in pictures. There are two ways of thinking in TCM. One is based on concepts. We extract those concepts about pathomechanisms. That's needed. But the other one is thinking in pictures. It's like two legs of a person. You cannot hop with one leg. For Jingfang's way of thinking, you need to think in pictures. Look at the language in Shanghan Lun. It's descriptive language. They don't give you too much concepts. The description of Jingfang is something tangible, feasible. You find the evidence to use the formula. That's the feature of the classic Fang Zheng. Less qi, weak, thin after high disease, dry mouth, would like to have liters of water, epigastric pain, and then this is abdominal presentation. Then use Da Chai Hu Tang. When we talk about Jingfang, learn about it, we need to think in pictures. Have this language in mind. Let me go on. The classics are descriptions: 黄连阿胶汤、柴龙加龙骨牡蛎汤、大柴胡汤、小柴胡汤. These are showing you typical pictures. When you read original text, it occurs to you there is someone in your mind's eye. So when you learn about Jingfang, you have to have a figure in your mind's eye. You must have this figure in your mind's eye. When you see a patient, the patient shows up in front of you, you will know the formula. Feel the pulse, have abdominal palpation, look the chief complaint, then find the formula. A lot of TCM doctors do so. They do so, really. Professor Liu did this as well. He has many patients. In provincial TCM hospital, we have clinics. All of a sudden, you have this way of thinking. Let's look at this classic. 泻心糖. This is a good formula. Lasted 3,500 years. You know, this was used 3,000 years ago. This passed down from generation to generation. This was in the synopsis of Golden Chamber. Lack of Ha Qi, there is vomiting of blood and blood from the nose. Look at this, is thinking in pictures. Lack of Ha Qi, or it's irregular. They have agitation, anxiety, and they have blood in mouth and in nose. This is a good formula to stop bleeding. This is treating bleeding in upper GI tract. By me, I also treat this. I will also treat subcutaneous bleeding. Also, I treat brain bleeding. Da Huang, Huang Lian, Huang Qin are so important. These are three Huangs. 半夏厚补汤. There is one description. A female feels there is a piece of meat in their throat. This is a female who uses this a lot. In their throat, they feel there is a piece of meat, cannot spit out, cannot swallow it. They feel bad, then 半夏厚补汤 will govern. This is a description. It's thinking in pictures, as if there is a piece of meat in the throat. We use 半夏厚补汤 to treat anxiety, where they feel a sense of blockade in the throat, or they feel a stone in their chest. They will call 911, or because of this anxiety. 半夏厚补汤 has this miraculous effect. It seems very serious for this patient, but it's anxiety or depression. Then 半夏厚补汤 will govern. This is treat emotional diseases. After taking this formula, patients feel happy. For females, they frown, they don't feel happy, and they have greasy coating of the tongue, then this will be very good. 黄连阿胶汤. The 6 characters, vexed and agitated, cannot lie down. This is a lady who cannot lie down and sleep well. I asked about their sleep. If they have sleeping disorders, then they have agitation, they have skin conditions. I will use Huang Tang, which will be efficacious. Zhang Zhongjing did not say so. You put a person in front of you with such a sketch, you get the picture. Vexed and agitated, cannot lie down in sleep. 豺龙加龙骨牡蛎汤. Full chest, agitated, vexed, no passing of urine, delirium. These are the symptoms. Feels heavy in the whole body, cannot lie on the sides. This is the sketch of a person. And this shows a person with low emotions, vexed, agitated, delirium, cannot move easily, cannot stab, feel fatigued. This is a person in front of you. For such a figure, it happens in a lot of patients with depression. Also, it happens in patients with brain diseases like stroke, Parkinson's disease, and could happen. So, 柴胡加龙骨牡蛎汤 is treating brain diseases. It's very effective. Neurologists, please look at this formula.
And even we can put it into a combination formula, but unfortunately, currently, there's no such type of the ready commercialized the formula. Indeed, there are readiness of the product in Japan and also China, Taiwan, but not in China. We have the insomnia patient, and then this can be used well in treating those patients. In order to help you memorize this formula, I invited this Mr. Ge You. He is actually the perfect example of that presentations. Because if Mr. Ge has some really cerebral palsies, then it is very important to use this decoction. Da Huan and also Renshen is quite important as an element. It's not only for the purgative, but also effective for delirium as well as refreshing the mind. If you have some delirium or dementia symptoms, then definitely these have to be used. For Lingui, Shugan Tang is quite important in clearly description, say epigastric fullness and also pain. The qi reversed into the thoracic chamber, and also if patients stand up, then it's a dizziness. For the cardiac insufficient patient you can use this type of the formula. When looking and interpreting the Zhang Zhongjing's formula, you will be able to have like a vivid understanding of that. Besides the original text, it's also clinical case record that can help you understand that. So Shanghan Lun is just like a book of that. He boiled down those kind of clinical cases into the really text lines. So reading the Shanghan Lun, you have to read a lot of these clinical cases, particularly by the later generations of doctors. These clinical cases is not only telling you this kind of clinical experience, but at the same time inspiring your reflections and also inspirations. A lot of the clinical cases indeed can tell us how to really see the patient and treat the disease. And this is why many really senior TCM doctors emphasize the reading of the doctrines, Cao Minggao and Hao De Lao, and many other experts have their own clinical cases, which deserves our attention, and Mr. Xu Lihou as well. I myself started from really my learning trip of the TCM started from a compilation of the clinical cases of different doctors, one-on-one basis of different pile up of those clinical cases can actually help us have a vivid interpretations of the doctrines. My young TCM physicians, please work on clarity on your own really clinical case record so as to have very vivid descriptions upon your clinical cases to really know patients on a holistic way. And we have sort of the descriptive medicines that is quite popular nowadays. Indeed, the TCM clinical cases are by nature the descriptive the case record of the patient cases. By being a good student to the clinical cases, not as like Western medicines, often you read nothing and understand nothing from the clinical case record nowadays. But in the Asian Chinese Asian China, these clinical physicians back then have a very vivid way of describing the symptoms and conditions. Indeed, those kind of natural languages can help us really vividly describe the patient's profile and also the other situations. I often ask my students to really have a vivid descriptions of those patients being described. Some patients said that my headache, my head seems not moving and stiffness, and it's like pouring the slurries into my head, just like that. This way of description is quite vivid. Also, you have to record though when the patient walking to your patient clinics, whether the patient can be talkative or not, whether the patient can be seen as have like a very active eyes or visions, or it's been more languid and also been fatigue and his body gestures as well as the hair color and also the body limbs activeness. You have to record that. At the same time, patient information like occupation, education, family history, the past treatment history, and also the other treatment therapies given. If the patient is actually from the engineering background, then often we have different decoctions. For example, art and histories using the Bansha Tang and the other Guizhi Tang, for example, if it is engineering and science background. So often the geographical locations plays a role here as well. For patients coming from southern or northern part of China, the decoctions or formulas should be different. Therefore, I would say that intuitive way of descriptions of the Jingfang should be established. In Wang Mengyin's case record, he's been very well recorded. He says it's the daughter of the Zhang Jun. Its name is Xue Yi. The menopauria, 37 years of old. The Jiao Ai Tang be given, but pain get more severe and started to vomit already 10 years. And the patients feel much pain when the pains occurs. It tells you how severity this really pain is, and it's our patient pain due to the dysmenorrhea. And the patient was asked, he's having the pulse, slippery pulse, and also rapid pulse. I asked the patient if it is thirsty, do you have lumbar pain? Do you have some really black colors of purple black colors of this discharged blood from menorrhea? Then the patient was quite surprised. He says that, right, you were asking the right question. It's exactly as you said. Then the patient asked, how do you know that? My doctor says that I know by my experiences. It's not only this presentation is in the contraindications of the Si Wu Tang. So that means it's not actually warm and also dry as well as grease, and the nourishing cannot be used for good outcomes. And they use the Huang to detoxify, added with Qing Hao and Wu and also Wei as well as Mao Gen. And next time with the medications taken, the patient actually are not having any dysmenorrhea next time. It might be due to these inflammations of the endometriums or other reasons, but for whatever reasons, the pain goes away. And the other case is by Mr. Liu Duzhou. Is Mr. Wang from Shanxi Datong. The dark and black facial complexions, self-complaints of the chest fullness and also dyspnea. Sometimes it must be suffocated, and then it's not he is not there to climb the stairs or the high slopes. Often the throbbing and palpitation of the heart. Then it's quite a vivid description of being diagnosed as a coronary heart disease by the Western medicines, but palpitation shows it's string and also deep veins. The moisture tongue, it's called Shuixing disease, and then by that diagnosis and using the Lingui Shugan Tang for 5 dosages, and the patient started to have like a very quick recovery. So with the relief of the chest fullness and also longer breaths. And then if looking into the mirror, these dark complexions also get a lot of improved. So after 50 dosages, the patient completely recovered. There are a lot of the clinical case records by different physicians of TCM. Like Mr. Yu Tinghong, I took some literature reviews. This is doctor from Jiangsu, and Mr. Jing mentioned there are a lot of the famous physicians from Jiangsu. He used to live in the Yixing, but is actually relocated to Jiangsu. The first case record that I really tried to copy and or read is just like a storytelling by a senior physician. He has his own experiences. He has a lot to say from his descriptions. This is a very good example of descriptive TCM medicines, and also the great scholar from Japan, the really Otsuka, Mr. Otsuka. He boiled down 30 years of his experiences into the 300 cases. So this is how the TCM clinical settings in the eyes of the Western medicine doctor. This is translated by Mr. Wang Lingyuan into Chinese. It's quite good, and you will know what are the diagnoses in the Western medicines, and then put it into the applications of formulas in Chinese TCMs. There are also many other good books like Ming Yi An or the Xu Ming Yi Lei An. So this slide is too small to showcase and snapshot of all kind of excellent case records. We have added really case clinical record of the Jingfang formulas, and it was actually one of the outcomes of the Jingfang Institute going to be published very soon. And thirdly, I have another, the Jingfang in my mind has another really way of thinking that is been minimalism. It's quite important. I love the fine art. I like this type of the really diagrams of or paintings of minimalism styles. You have the skies and also waters, and also in between you have only two trees. It's quite comfortable seeing these kind of images. Such type of the minimalism in thinking is also quite unique to Jingfang. The Jingfang is just like that. It's the minimalism exemplified in Jingfang. First of all, starting from diagnosis, it's quite important. You really see the pulse patterns, you make the right diagnoses, and also give the treatment by indications. So regardless of whatever things, you have to observe, listen, question, and pulse taking to get the treatment. These four ways of the diagnosis, as I said, is to see the pulse pattern, to really feel the pulse, and at the same time to make the right diagnosis of what is the disease about. It's quite minimalism, and we're seeing in treating and diagnosing. Such type of the minimalism is actually an intuitive informed, is an intuitive treatment. Often we call it the indication informed or the presentation informed. This is about the intuitive way of thinking, and with the good application of that, immediately you will be having immediate reasoning process of the patient's conditions and make the right diagnosis. This is Chen Bukai, great expert, Chen Botan, of great expert of Jingfang in Lingnan, in Guangzhou, Xianggang, Hong Kong. He's actually a good scholar and renowned expert of the Jingfang. He pays a partial attention to really seeing the patient. Often he felt the pulse and immediately he know what is happening. And Mr. Huang Shipei is from the former president of the Yuexiu TCM hospital. Often he said that people were surprised at quite fast in feeling the pulse. Mr. Chen Botan often is touching upon the wrist, and then he will actually immediately know what happened to the patient. But he has a good really experiences in seeing the patient. Often you can see the picture here. His eyes are really so big, and also see the patient from even the distance. This observation is quite important. Everything started from observation when patient walk into your clinics. If it is only like a list pulse taking but without observation, it doesn't work. Mr. Chen Yiling, he's the disciples of Hu Shuqing and Mr. Hu. He said that I sometimes ask a patient, even actually challenging that if it is only pulse taking, for example, by punching two holes on the wall and then without seeing the patient, without observation of the patient, the pulse taking doesn't mean anything or doesn't give you good guidance. The Fan Wenhu is actually an expert of TCM in the Ningbo. He is also a good expert in observation. In Ningxian County record, he said that this expert of Mr. Fan Wenhu is actually an expert of the Asian formulas, and he used the dosages in big forms, in big dosages. He see when the patient arrived in his clinics, this Mr. Fan, the doctor himself, would observe the patient, and immediately he would know what is the disease about, and often the disease will be immediately cured. We had a patient of measles, and then These patients was given Ma Huang immediately upon the observation. It's like an 8 chen. It's 8 chen or like 4 grams of the Ma Huang immediately. And the family members of the patient were surprised that why you're using the Ma Huang. And then people or like a petrified is saying that if you're using the baqian or the 4 grams of the mahuan, it was too much. And then immediately they said that why not we give a pediatric patient half of the dosages, and then after taking the medications, the really headache goes away. The patient symptoms was much relieved. Then Mr. Fang, who says that what happens to the patient, he said that I know that you are actually trying to happen the dosages, and this is why I give 8 grams of the da huang. I know that you're going to have it, so it's actually 4 grams of the ma huang I want to use, but I know you're going to have my dosages, so I did it. And then if you have it to even further, like a 2 grams, then patient will not be possible to be saved. Then Hu Xishu, he is actually an expert in this area as well. Without telling the family, without the family member telling the history of the condition, the Mr. Hu already give the prescription, Ma Huang Zhiqing, and also another herbs. So this patient says that, all right, is Mr. Hu giving this prescription and indeed taking the formula, then the disease was cured. And then the patient come back and ask, was this kind of a star-colored facial complexion? The Mr. Hu says that it's a Ma Huang Fuzi, the presentation. It's the dark facial complexion in this case, and then it's Ma Huang Fuzi Xing Tang by the really presentation. If Li Kui or Lu Zhishen come to me, I will give him the same, actually, the formulas with no further questions.
I've been repeating in Shanghai Lun. This is a book from Zhang Zhongjing. There is Henan dialect. In Henan dialect, zhong means okay. If it matches both the formula and presentation is zhong, gui zhi, not okay. Chai hu tang, not okay. So you see, Zhang Zhongjing's thinking is very simple. It's not that complicated. Rounds of discussion, reflection, no. The formulas are very simple. There are 113 formulas with 93 herbs. So the pharmacy will be made easy. Each formula is 4.18. And, there are 2 herbs in one decoction, 2 or 3 or 4. Xiao Chai Hu Tang has 7 herbs, then Wang Lian Tang, 7. Yeah, it's from 3 to 8. The most is 12 herbs. I'm talking about the decoctions. We don't use 20 or 30 herbs. Zhongjing's formulas are very simple. We have a lot of confused decoctions. How can you make that into a formula? Cheng Yiren, as the master said, it's just a mixture of different herbs. If you use a simple formula, this is a great master. If you use too much herbs in one formula, this is rudimentary. Sometimes we have the wrong direction, because if you have the wrong direction, this industry will be jeopardized. For a formula, there should be a maximum number for the total number of herbs. There should be a capping for the price. In Zhejiang TCM administration, they have a maximum number, 17 herbs in one formula, maximum. Mr. Cao Yongpu, also from Jiangyin, my hometown, 桂枝1钱，猪茯苓3钱，生白术3钱，炒泽蟹2钱. Very simple formulas. He treated poor people, and those formulas were cheap and efficacious. This great master was treated as a wild doctor. People say you're using the wild approach. No, this is the right approach. This is where Tao lies. I have a case here. 59-year-old male. This patient has Parkinson's disease. There was GI bleeding. It happens every year. And there was duodenum ulcer, and blood pressure was low, 80/40. I used 炙甘草 15, 生甘草 15, 泡姜 10, 干姜 5, and fried rice put into the soup. Blood pressure increased. There is better vitality, good complexion, but increased by 3 kg, and he's always advertising for me. Jingfang is very cheap, does not cost too much money, treat a big disease. In the medical reform in China, if we don't put Jingfang in there, it is something missing. Chinese citizens need such small formulas. As Jingfang doctors, they have simple values. We only work for efficacy, relieve the pain. We don't consider the price of the drug. We don't look at the face of a doctor. It's not a process we put politics, commerce, or religion in there. We have the sole goal of treating patients. In that way, you can have a good formula. Yu Xinhong said, I'm an upright person. If I see a dangerous disease, I will use the right formula because I only fear heaven, because I have my consciousness. Because I have conscious. During Spring Festival, I stayed in the patient family for half a month. It rescued the patient. It treated the female with anorexia, and it treated the patient for 2 months, and this was recorded in records. Our fun runners have this great spirit, this great professionalism. If you want to make money only, you cannot develop your academic capabilities. The way of thinking for Jingfang is very simple. It's like Zen. It's natural, clear as water. This kind of philosophy of simplicity is intuitive, just like Zen. I've given you 3 points. The core content of Fang is for real. It's true. It's about authenticity. Simple thinking is benevolent for everybody. The language of thinking in pictures is beautiful. We seek truth, benevolence, and beauty, because this is medicine that is seeking truth, benevolence, and beauty. We have the standardized approach, but it's flexible. It's based on real science, but it's full of life. It came from traditional history of China, but it can be used in the modern society. It's a great treasure for the humankind in the world. With that, I thank you.